You are following at least 10 rules today that nobody ever wrote down, and breaking even one of them would feel physically uncomfortable. Number 10. Every single person in an elevator is silently agreeing to a rule they never spoke out loud. You step in with strangers, and within 2 seconds, everyone rotates to face the door. Nobody says do this. Nobody was taught this in school. But try standing in an elevator facing the other passengers instead of the door and watch what happens. People shift their weight. They check their phones faster than usual. Some genuinely leave and wait for the next one. Researchers studying small group behavior in confined public spaces have long noted that facing the exit isn't really about watching the numbers count up. It's a way of formally agreeing not to look at each other because eye contact in an inescapable box for more than a couple of seconds reads as a challenge, not a greeting. The elevator turn is a tiny truce. You are all promising, silently and instantly, to pretend this is not as strange as it actually is. Try it once, on purpose, facing the wrong way, and pay attention to how quickly your own body wants to correct itself even before anyone reacts. That discomfort isn't manners. It's a rule enforcing itself from the inside. Number 9. The driver you hate most on the highway might actually be doing it right. On a crowded road, when a lane closes ahead, most drivers merge early, forming one long line well before the actual bottleneck. And most drivers get furious at anyone who drives past that line and merges at the very last second. That late merger feels like a cheater. Traffic engineers have shown, repeatedly, that the late merger is actually doing it correctly. Using both lanes fully until the merge point and then alternating, one car from each lane moves more cars through the bottleneck in less time than everyone crowding into one lane early. It's called the zipper merge, and it's often the official recommended technique, but almost nobody follows it because it violates a deeper unwritten rule than traffic efficiency. Wait your turn. Don't cut ahead. We will accept a slower system if it feels fair over a faster one that feels like queue jumping. The rule isn't really about the road, it's about status. Which is why campaigns to teach drivers the zipper merge keep failing even when the math is explained clearly, with diagrams, on official signage. You can prove a rule is inefficient, and people will still defend it, because the rule was never really tracking efficiency in the first place. It was tracking who waited their turn like a decent person, and who didn't. Number 8. Someone else bumps into you, and somehow you're the one who apologizes. Their shoulder hits yours, and before you can even think, the word is already out. Not them. You. This happens constantly, and most people never notice they're doing it. Linguists who study apology behavior have pointed out that this kind of reflex, usually isn't about fault at all. It's a social smoothing tool, a way of signaling I am not a threat. Let's both move on without this becoming a thing. Which is why the people who say it most reflexively tend to be the ones socialized to avoid conflict in the first place, and the people who almost never say it, even when they clearly caused the collision, tend to have grown up in environments where apologizing first read as weakness. The same 3-letter reflex is quietly tracking who in a given culture, or even a given family, was taught to diffuse tension and who was taught to hold ground. Some countries even have a reputation, half joke and half genuine finding, for apologizing at a national level far more than the situation calls for, and researchers have used that pattern to study how deeply a habit of preemptive politeness can get built into a population, one bumped shoulder at a time. Number 7. You know exactly what to text back and you make yourself wait anyway. 10 minutes, maybe an hour. Not because you're busy, but because replying instantly can look too eager, and studies on digital communication norms have found that people deliberately calibrate response delay to manage how interested they appear, especially early in a relationship or a new professional exchange. It's an entirely unspoken timing code, and everyone reading this just felt a specific memory of doing exactly that. The strange part is how universally understood the code is. Nobody taught you the acceptable delay window. You absorbed it purely by watching what happened when you replied too fast once, and it felt like you'd given something away. The window even shifts, depending on who's texting whom. A reply that feels perfectly normal from a friend can feel loaded, almost aggressive, from someone you're newly interested in, and everyone recalibrates that math constantly without ever writing down a single number. Number 6. There's a jar of unguarded cash sitting on the counter of nearly every coffee shop, and almost nobody steals it. No lock, no camera. Just strangers, and an unspoken agreement. Behavioral economists have run versions of this as informal field experiments for years, And the theft rate on visible, unguarded tip jars is remarkably low compared to what people predict beforehand. The rule holding that money in place isn't a lock or a camera. It's the fact that everyone in line can see everyone else, and taking money from an open jar in front of witnesses converts you instantly and permanently into the person who did that. We police each other's honesty constantly, just by standing nearby. Move that same jar somewhere private, out of anyone's line of sight, and the honor system quietly starts leaking. The cash isn't protected by trust in strangers, it's protected by the fact that strangers can see you. Number 5. Two strangers on an empty train, sitting as far apart as possible, are both silently enforcing a rule neither of them could name. A third person gets on. They will not sit next to either stranger unless every other seat is taken. Sociologists who study public space have documented this pattern across cities and cultures for decades. Humans instinctively maximize distance from strangers until forced to compress. Break this rule deliberately, sit directly beside someone on an empty train, and you will watch real discomfort happen in real time because you have just violated a spacing agreement nobody ever announced but everyone was enforcing. The threshold for how much distance counts as normal even changes city to city, shaped by how crowded that place usually is, which means the rule isn't fixed. It's constantly renegotiated by however many strangers happen to be in the car with you. Number 4. A held door is actually a loan, and you have about 3 seconds to pay it back. Someone holds it open for you from 10 feet away. You now owe them a slight jog, a thank you, and eye contact, all within about 3 seconds, or the moment curdles into something faintly awkward for both of you. This is a live transaction with a strict time limit, and everyone involved instinctively knows the deadline without ever discussing it. Miss the window, and you'll feel it. Behavioral researchers describe this as a micro-reciprocity ritual, one of thousands of tiny exchanges that keep strangers cooperating smoothly. It costs nothing and means almost nothing on its own. But a culture that reliably pays these tiny debts is a culture where bigger cooperation, the kind that actually matters, tends to work too. Which is why people notice, almost instinctively, when someone consistently fails to pay these small debts. It rarely gets discussed out loud. It just quietly becomes the reason nobody can explain why they don't fully trust that one coworker. Number 3. In the moment you're most afraid of saying the wrong thing, an entire culture hands you a script to read from. Someone loses a parent, and you say, "I'm so sorry for your loss." Not because those exact words are especially comforting, because deviating from them is genuinely risky. Grief researchers who study consolation language have found that people overwhelmingly default to familiar, almost scripted phrases in these moments, not from a lack of feeling, but because grief is a moment where saying the wrong original thing can cause real harm, and a well-worn phrase is safe precisely because it has been tested by millions of uses. The rule isn't insincerity. It's that in the one moment where you're most afraid of getting it wrong, the entire culture hands you a script so you don't have to improvise. Try improvising anyway, saying something original and personal instead, and notice how much more carefully you choose every word, because for once, the safety net of the standard phrase is gone. Number 2, skip this one sentence on your way out the door, and people will feel something went wrong, even if they can't say what. You leave a party, a meeting, a family dinner, and right at the door, someone throws in one more kind line. "That was so nice to see you. You look great. Thanks for coming." Conversation researchers call this a closing ritual, and its real function has almost nothing to do with the compliment's content. It exists to signal that the interaction is ending on good terms, that no unresolved tension is being carried out the door. Skip it, and even a perfectly pleasant conversation can retroactively feel a little cold. We are so tuned to this rule that its absence registers before we can even explain why something felt off. You can replay a completely fine conversation for hours afterward, hunting for what went wrong, when the actual answer is simply that nobody said the closing line, and your brain filed that gap under something is wrong here long before your conscious mind caught up. Number 1. The most powerful rule on this entire list isn't written anywhere, and it's never enforced with words. It's enforced with silence. When someone breaks a serious social norm, a group doesn't usually confront them directly. It stops responding to them. Fewer replies, shorter eye contact, slower invitations. Psychologists who study ostracism have found that being excluded activates some of the same neural pain circuitry as physical injury, and that humans will change their behavior to avoid it faster and more thoroughly than they'll change it to avoid direct criticism. This is almost certainly ancient. For most of human history, being cut off from the group wasn't an inconvenience. It was a survival threat. Every other rule on this list is enforced by mild discomfort. This one is enforced by something closer to an alarm bell wired into you a very long time ago, long before anyone had a word for etiquette. None of these rules were ever written down, and that's exactly why they work. A rule you have to be reminded of is a rule people break. A rule you never had to be taught, one you just absorbed by watching what made a room go quiet, is a rule you will keep for the rest of your life without ever consciously deciding to. You didn't learn any of this. You caught it. And now that you can see it, you'll notice it everywhere, in every elevator, every merge lane, every doorway, for the rest of your life.